We're here today with David Rimberg to talk about wisdom of seniors. So we'll be conversing for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and getting to know you, and hopefully tweaking from you your wisdom as a result of your, I think you're in your 70s, correct?
I'm 73.
73.
1942.
1942.
It's hard to believe that that's that many years ago.
Yeah. So why don't we start with where were you born?
Okay, well, I was born in Brooklyn, as I said, April 6, 1942, to Sally and Saul Rimberg. And my dad was actually a Russian immigrant. He came here when he was 7 years old.
Okay.
So I do have Russian in my background.
Okay. And mom?
My mom was born here in the U.S.
Okay.
And
is she Russian or no?
No. Well, her parents were Russian. So my grandparents on both sides, my mother and father's side, were both Russian descent.
Okay.
And I was actually named after my father's father, or my grandfather's half brother, whose name was David.
Okay.
And during the Russian pogroms, David was like a medical technician, and he was killed. And then when the Tsar used to go through these towns in Russia, killing everybody, especially if you were Jewish.
Wow.
So
that's your namesake.
That's my namesake, and, you know. And when I found that as a young boy, that the interpretation is beloved. Of course, I want to be a beloved person, I've carried that with me.
Very nice.
So I feel beloved.
Very nice.
You know,
very nice.
So I carry that with
so
me
you came
all
into
the
the world with this.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have, and I was told recently that there are. That the name David has the least amount of divorces.
Really?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And,
wow.
You know,
wow.
like a name like Michael or
Yeah.
Joseph or
Right,
right.
so
on and so forth.
So you are married.
Yes.
You are not divorced.
Right.
And you've been married for how many years?
We've been married. My wife Andrea and I know each other since 1968, and we were married in 1971. Mm-hmm. So that's 40 plus years, the same woman, and I can honestly say I still like her.
That's fantastic.
Okay, I love her,
That's great.
But I still like her too.
You love her, but you still like her. Yeah. There are some people that love, but they don't like.
No,
That's great.
If anything, it's enhanced over the years.
How so? How would you describe that enhancement?
That in retrospect, I did something pretty radical when I was young with her. Okay, she was a divorced lady, and she had 3 kids. Okay, and I met her in Brighton Beach at Bay 2 in Brooklyn.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we hit it off real well. And then, you know, we kind of fell in love, but the thing that was kind of radical for the early 70s, in the late 60s, was that this was a divorced woman, and
3 children.
3 kids, you know, 2, 6, and 7, something like that.
Young.
They were young kids, and, you know, in a sense I had no choice. When you love somebody, they come with whatever package they come with.
Right, and this happened to be,
you know,
3 children,
yeah,
young
3 children,
package.
you know. So, needless to say, it was, as I said before, it was kind of radical, but we fell in love, and, you know, eventually we got married in 1971.
How did your parents feel about the fact that?
Well, they were opposed to it.
They were?
Yeah, and, you know, it was a little uncomfortable at the beginning. And
They didn't embrace her immediately?
Well, not really. You know, it was not because of the culture at the time. You know, a divorced woman with 3 kids, and here I am, college grad, was not previously married. But you know, there were a lot of these external forces, but the thing that dominated was our love for one another.
Okay.
And, you know, and eventually...
That was unshakable
Yeah,
and
yes.
unbreakable.
I mean, you know, people tried to... The people
Pull
who
you
tried
apart.
to pull me apart are no longer together, and we are together.
How about
so,
that?
you know, after
How
all
about
these
that?
years, we, you know...
That was quite courageous of you.
Oh, yeah, and I always liked the challenge in my life, but I didn't know how it was going to show up. But, you know,
Okay.
this is...
But you did show up.
Yes.
That's
And,
great.
you know, it's, as an aside here, at the time, Andrea was going to a psychotherapist, and she recommended that I go to a psychotherapist, which I
Okay.
did.
Wow.
So I was in psychotherapy with one person, she was in psychotherapy with another person, and then we had 3 kids that were in psychotherapy,
Okay.
and then we had family psychotherapy. So we were therapied out, you know.
Okay.
And that was very trendy at the time
Yeah,
to have
right,
psychotherapy with, you know, social workers.
Was it helpful?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it
Okay.
was helpful.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So the commitment you separated from your family by taking this radical step to embrace the Andrea and the 3 children, the package, and you committed to that. How old were you?
Well, 25,
You were young. You were a young man. How old was Andrea?
24.
24. You were both very young, and you broke that family taboo, that family kind of culture that says you can't do this, you shouldn't do this.
Right.
Wow, that was radical, very radical and courageous.
So,
Looking back, is that how you view yourself?
well,
then- I mean, did you feel like you were doing a courageous?
well, here's what came up for me when you just said that. In subsequent coursework that I've done in therapeutic environments, we did the S training, which is now the form. But one of the things I discovered about myself as a ground of being was that I like to be found out. I'll tell you what that means. I like to be found out. So what that means, to be found out, number one, that I married a woman with 3 kids. And I have a doctor's degree, and people don't know that, but I do in a business environment. My nickname is Doc. Okay, so I keep it very very present. Then I also go to the gym every day, well, 5 days a week, and people in them talking to me find that out about me.
Yeah.
So, and I said to you, I like to be found out. Okay, those are some of the things that I like to be found out about. Okay, that I have 2 master's degrees, and I don't, one in nuclear engineering, one mechanical engineering.
You just found that out about you. That's great. That's great.
So I don't, in a sense, publicize that, and I don't wear a doctor label on my hat.
No, you don't.
And the other thing that is kind of curious about this whole thing, I own a 1989 Bentley, which also, when talking, men like to talk hard
Cars.
talk,
Exactly.
muscle cars and whatnot.
Right,
So
right.
here I am with this exotic car, and for my 50th birthday, I bought a 1979 Rolls Royce.
Okay. So you enjoy those.
So, and then I became the vice president of activities for the local, called the Atlantic Region Rolls Royce Owners Club. So there are a lot of these things that evolved by someone getting a little close to me,
Right.
And
They
talking to me,
find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides,
Yeah.
going to the movies and having a nice dinner, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, but I'm wondering, looking back now on this radical, as you described it, moment where you made a decision to go against people's wishes as to how they pictured your life or expected your life to go forward as a young man. Did you feel courageous at that time when you were in the moment of actively saying, I'm going to marry this woman, 3 kids or not, whether you like this or not or approve or not?
Well, I had this, I guess, internal, tug of war going on. It's like I don't want to alienate my family. On the other hand, I don't want to, I want to, have them align behind this.
Right.
So eventually, after a marriage of several years, and they began to see that it was working, in spite of the quote circumstances, they acknowledged it, and then they were okay with it.
They began to gradually
Right.
accept
Right.
this decision that you made, which was different from what they pictured as to how your life should be.
And also as an aside, my brother, who did quote the mainstream thing, married a woman, got divorced, doesn't see his kids now, and is a very strange guy. I hate to say it in those kind of terms. I don't have a relationship with him. I tried calling him and whatnot. He's 3.5 years older than me. So here's the person that quote did the more mainstream thing, that has been divorced and did not get remarried for 30 years, at least, And here I am, the
Radical
the
exception
radical
to
person,
the rule.
and we're in love, and we're in I like, and
That's nice,
and
40 some odd years.
yeah,
And 3 children.
yes,
And
and 5 grandchildren.
5 grandchildren.
Yeah.
So you took on that commitment.
Yes.
You embraced that commitment. You committed to her children. I would imagine they see you as the father.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
They
yeah.
embraced you. You embraced them. Family was very important to you. Is important to you. Looking back, you don't have. Looking back. You made a commitment. Do you think that, has that commitment changed over the years? Has it solidified? Has it grown stronger? Have there ever been times throughout the years of your life when that commitment has weakened, or?
No, we've had our problems, but they were never about commitment to loving one and sticking to one.
That maintained.
Yeah, there was
That was
always that.
maintained.
We had financial problems. In the process of growing up and owning a house and working and stuff, there were financial stresses for us, but our relationship and the commitment to the relationship was never threatened. There was upsetting. There was, you get the interruption calls. Your phone's going to be turned off. Your car's going to be repossessed. Shit like stuff like that, and. So you get a little nutty with that kind of stuff.
Anyone does. Everyone
So,
does.
you bounce a check. So,
Right, it's like-
who doesn't?
Right.
It happens. So ultimately, though, there was never the relationship.
commitment. That remained constant,
Yeah.
despite all of the externals
Right.
that were hitting you at the time.
Right. There was never, our love was never threatened. Just the other circumstances
Right.
were, oh my God,
Right.
how are we going to handle this?
Okay.
She was always a line behind me, even though, from time to time she'd make me wrong, but that always happens in a relationship,
That's right.
But there was never a long-term,
Rupture or kind of.
we didn't separate because of that. We slept together every night.
That's great. That's great. So, family commitment, very solid,
Yeah.
strong. Okay. What about spirituality? You say you're Jewish.
Yes.
Were you raised in the Jewish faith? To what degree?
My parents had a kosher home, but outside the home we were not kosher.
Okay.
We'd have Chinese food and
Growing up in Brooklyn, I
yeah.
would imagine you ate a whole host of different kinds of food.
And my father used to sneak a ham sandwich.
Uh-oh.
so, I remember doing that. And but the spirituality part was when I was in. We used to go to the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur when I was living with my parents, and they would observe the Jewish holidays for the most part. The other holidays, not so much. They would just let them close by. But I'll never forget this incident, which kind of discouraged me from the quote the formal religious dogma.
Okay.
Was there's in the on Yom Kippur, which is the day you're supposed to be written in the good book,
Right.
or not, you know.
Right.
So there's a theme prayers called Al Chet, and these are I've sinned for this, I've sinned for that, and you know in the book that you read from, there's the English and then there's the Hebrew, and they have all these quote sins. I said, I'm not such a bad guy. I mean, I haven't sinned so much. I'll curse. You know, I'll do. You know, I'll not tell. You know, I'll get a speeding ticket. I'll bounce a check.
Right.
But I haven't sinned to the extent that you know.
You're a bad person.
Yeah. So I said, you know what? And there's actually the symbolic portion of that is you're supposed to pound your chest a little. Okay. You know, your heart. You know,
Right.
I've sinned for this. I've sinned for that. And I'm looking at it and I said, look, you know what? I'm not this bad guy. So at that point, and I was, 15, 16, 17 years old, I said, I'm not going to necessarily observe the dogma. I believe in God, and I believe in the spirit of being a good person,
Right.
and helping.
Good Samaritan.
Yeah. But not necessarily in some of the dogma, the rituals.
Jewish religion.
Yeah. So I'm very sensitive to being Jewish. Okay. I like being Jewish. I don't wear Jewish stars, but it's and I'm sympathetic with some of the Israeli issues that are going on. I'm not as ultra conservative or ultra orthodox in the beliefs that they have.
Right.
But the spirituality is live and let live. That's kind of like my motto.
Don't be judgmental.
Right.
Don't be
I mean,
condemning.
right. Look,
Try not to be condemning.
I work every day in New York, and I see all kinds of religious garb, anywhere from Hasidim with the payas and the hats, to burqas, to other types of outfits that people wear for their for religious beliefs. I'll wear a pair of jeans, and a hard hat because I'm in the construction industry. That's my costume, and they have their costumes.
That's right.
So, and let them just be, and that's what they believe in. That's fine.
That's great. And so, and at 15, that's what pops out at me. At 15, you made this kind of connection and decision.
Yeah.
So that was radical also for a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I didn't know that that's the way it was going to be. I mean, I subsequently, until I left home, and moved out on my own, I didn't. I observed the holidays with my parents, but when I moved out, I didn't.
And the children, your children, did
Now the only thing they know is about themselves that they're Jewish. That's it. Okay. They actually, they did. My two sons did get bar mitzvahed.
Okay.
Okay. And the funny story is one of the rabbis that helped. Well,
them through that process.
That process of the Haftorah was we had some dinner after after the bar mitzvah, and there was the rabbi was eating something crunchy. He said, and what he didn't realize, what we didn't realize, was that he was eating bacon. So the rabbi ate crunchy, ate bacon, and he's still living.
He's still living. There was no striking him dead, or
Right.
maybe he did the,
Yeah,
yeah, right. That's funny. That's a funny story. So, do you see yourself as accumulating throughout your years of life a kind of knowledge or wisdom looking back? If you were to compare yourself, the David sitting here now compared to the David of 15 or 25, what would be the same? What would be different?
All right, let me give you my answer to that. Is when I was younger, I like to describe myself as being very linear in my thinking. In other words, I thought things were the way they were because I thought that that's the way they were.
Okay.
So here I married this woman who was not
Linear.
linear thinking. She's an artist. She didn't know she was an artist at the time, and she was very whimsical. But over the years, between my linear thinking that rubbed off on her, and some of her non-linear thinking rolled off.
Rubbed off on you.
So we kind of like. So now, to use the trendy expression of thinking outside the box.
Okay.
So there's a lot of outside the box thinking. I mean, there's
Linear.
yeah, versus non-linear.
Right.
So there's it kind of we tempered each other. So
Yeah.
there's things that you necessarily have to do inside the box,
Right.
pay your bills, that kind of thing. And then there's outside the box. How do we handle certain situations? Not like we were used to, but something that's a little different.
Outside the box.
Right.
Radical in some ways.
Right.
Okay. So in that sense, when you look at yourself younger, you see yourself more linear.
Right.
As compared to now. There's a blend. There's an ability to be non-linear and,
Right.
and outside the box.
Now the thing is, what I didn't necessarily mention was that I'm an engineer by training, and engineers need to think that way.
Linear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, creative engineering is not linear. I mean, you have to take, the laws of science and apply them somehow.
Right.
But if you want to create new things, new approaches, you have to be outside the box or non-linear.
So the partnership that you have with your wife, you've both kind of affected one another and helped one another be non-linear, outside the box, linear, in the
Right,
box.
right.
So it's a nice. So you've changed. There's this.
Oh, absolutely.
You've changed.
I used to be, if it wasn't done my way, it's the highway, one of those deals,
Okay.
But now it's like I'm much more tolerant of other people's ways of doing things. I allow people to be, and allow people to express themselves, and it works for me to do that.
Going forward in your life, hopefully there'll be many, 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 many more decades. What are your hopes, dreams, aspirations? Do you think about the future and what you want it to be and how you want it to be?
Well, I'm giving myself at my age probably 5 more working years, active working years. I go into New York every day. That's where most of the activity that utilizes my services is in New York City. So there's basically a major commitment to my work, okay, which I really enjoy, and it's easy. I call myself a professional looker. I just look at people who are working on a job site, it's a construction site, and I make sure that they wear their harnesses,
They're safe.
that they're safe, that they're got the proper what they refer to as personal protective equipment, the goggles. I wear the hard hat, wearing gloves. If there's a possibility of a fire, they make sure they have fire extinguishers, and the people around them are, considerate of what they're doing, so no one injures one another.
Right.
So if I'm going to do that for at least
Next
another
5
5 years, you see, that would take me to about the age of 78. Okay, so after that, okay, I'm not a golfer. I don't play tennis. I love going to the gym, and one of the things that's showing up for me in my life right now is kind of I mentioned before that I was involved with the Rolls-Royce Owners Club as an activities vice
Coordinator.
president, which I would like to get back involved with that, with the club, with the cars. And one of the things that Andrea and I do, we cook together. I'm the slicer and dicer.
Okay. You work well with
She's the the seasoner in the
Okay,
cooker,
okay.
and I do
Little
the cleanup.
creativity there. She does her-
Yeah, she does the creative. She's an excellent seasoner. So I slice and dice. She does the seasoning and the cooking, and I do the cleanup. So, but what I notice about myself is that I like to handle knives. You know, when I'm cutting and cutting. So I'm good with small stuff. So one of the things I like to do is get some more skills with a knife and use it to decorate fruits and vegetables. You know, they cut up these things and
beautiful,
they make flowers out of carrots,
tomatoes, and whatever. Yeah.
So I like to do
Artistic
that.
kind of.
Yeah, I
Great.
like to
That's
learn
great.
how to do that.
That's great.
The other thing is that I noticed I was good. A friend of ours, maybe 20 years ago, gave us a potter's wheel, and we still have it at home, and it's not used. But when I did use it, I did very well at it. And
Nice.
Andrea didn't. She's a sculptor by.
She didn't do well?
She, this thing turns, and you get the clay there. So, but what I noticed, so I'm very good with my fingers.
Tactile.
And the forces that you need to create something.
Right.
So the wheel's turning, and I'm doing that, and and
Nice.
it really worked for me. So that's one of the other things that the future holds for me, is to do that. We have a studio at home. It's sitting right there. You got to rev it up. So between the knife skills, the food,
The cooking,
creativity,
the
the cooking, we do together. The potter's
sculpture,
wheel.
pottery.
So that's
That's a full menu there you've got.
And the gym. I always got to have the gym.
Okay.
The gym,
All right,
the
but you won't be
exercise.
going into New York to do
No,
that. You'll do that locally.
No, I'm
Or
not
home.
going to do that. I'll do
Okay,
it at
yeah.
home
Those days will be over.
Or in the neighborhood, we'll go to
Right.
a regular gym.
That's fantastic.
So,
Very good. So you've got some clear.
Now, one of the things that I'm a little covert about
Uh-huh.
is when I was about 32 years old, I always was interested in playing the flute. So I bought a flute, and I started taking flute lessons.
Really?
And I got as far as Stevie Wonder's Marcherie Amour,
Nice.
And then Flint Mine.
Nice,
It sounded like a high school band, But I started doing that, and then but it needed a lot of practice. And I had pictures of myself when I was that young, when I was 32. There's this famous jazz flautist, Herbie Mann. I picture myself up on stage wailing with this, this flute. So, but I dropped it. It's just
Life
I
was-
have a lot of reasons, but
You want to pick it up?
yeah. So
You're thinking of picking it
then
up.
about 10 years after that, I picked it up again.
Oh, you did?
Andrew got me a birthday present for his teacher. As a flute teacher, so I started doing it again, but just my regular business activities, prevented me.
Yeah.
So there's that also in the background that that I have this interest. Because put it this way, when I hear a flute on the radio for some tune, preferably a jazz flautist, my ears perk up. And I get this stimulus.
You get excited just talking about it. I can see it. That's great. So that's another thing that you think about doing, and I just found that out about you. You're a great person to find all these things about. It's fantastic. Yeah, you like being found out. That's great. That's great.
One of the things that I want to say about Andrea, she would, when we would embrace, just hug. And there's kind of like a timing to do that, and I'll sort of let go. She said, "I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting you go. I'm still hanging. I'm not finished with you yet." So she continues to hug me, even though I'm complete with it. But see, that's the kind of relationship and commitment we've had,
Throughout.
all the way along the way and into the future.
That's fantastic.
So I tolerate that.
So if you were to give a prescription to a younger audience about life, and what would you say to them about something to help them go forward in life that you think would be meaningful to them? anything?
I think, well, yeah, and not being too philosophical about it, but.
But you can be if you want.
Okay. Be tolerant of others.
That's great.
You know,
great.
accept them for who they are and who they're not. Because there's a lot of, you know, I guess when you first create relationship, you try to mold one another into something else, that the person who they're not. But having the underlying commitment to the relationship and allowing people to be who they are. I mean,
Respecting who they are.
Right.
Differences, tolerate who they are.
Yeah.
Tolerance, not tolerate, but tolerance.